Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about Pluto's stationing direct. So there's quite a few points I want to cover here, and I guess the first thing that I think it's important to consider and consider just in terms of your own chart relative to where Pluto is. So first of all, just to kind of expand on this from the point of view of when Pluto first entered Capricorn. So that took place in around about 2008. And that within itself is a evolutionary cycle relative to the whole collective and the whole perspective on reality, right? Because it's Capricorn, which corresponds to our perspective of reality, our experience of reality, and our co-creation with reality. Furthermore, it also speaks to the conditioned perspective of reality that we have had, are born into, so that the family, cultural, religious, whatever it may be, upbringing that we've had forms certain conditions in our psyche. And furthermore, it also speaks to the conditions that we've brought in from previous lifetime experiences. So we've had Pluto in Capricorn since 2008, basically decomposing, destructing, metamorphosizing the whole aspect of reality, right? And we've seen how that's manifested on the external level relative to the collective in terms of all the various systems that create the infrastructure and structure of this physical experience we call reality. So there's been a process of transformations, transmutations, deaths and rebirths that have occurred on that collective sphere. And then in turn, it has also taken us individually through this process of transformation relative to what our understanding of reality is and how we have engaged with life and reality on those levels. I just actually want to read just a couple of comments here before I go into the stationary direct comments. So these are some of the psychological implications with Pluto in Capricorn, which, remember, it's been there since 2008, and we are, at the verge of that, the closure of this cycle, and that's why Pluto's stationing direct at the moment is extremely crucial, collectively and individually. It stations direct on the 26th degree, and it will never return to this degree again in our lifetime, ever again. So it's really at that fine tipping point of just pulling everything together in terms of what it's meant since 2008. So it's probably going to be felt slightly more intense, I think, for the rest of this year, and actually for 2023 and 2024, because in 2023, Pluto ingresses into Aquarius in March, and then, goes retrograde, and so goes back into Capricorn again and tracks 29, 28, and 27 degrees of Capricorn again, right? And then in 2024, it begins the brand new journey of the sign, the ingress into Aquarius, right? But here are some things to consider. Common psychological symptoms during this time, meaning Capricorn themes. Sorry, let me just start that again. Common psychological symptoms during this time are wariness leading to a sense of emptiness, and personal meaninglessness. Now that sounds a bit depressing, I know, but just bear with me and I'll unpack that as well as read a few more comments. This wariness is not only connected to this life, but it is also based on many other lives that have been structured upon the old and now crystallized emotional, intellectual, physical, and spiritual patterns. This wariness is necessary, for it promotes reflection upon what needs to be changed. The sense of meaninglessness associated with current circumstances and the overall nature of the individual's reality is also necessary, because it encourages a deep soul searching that revolves around the need to restructure one's life to induce new meaning, purpose, and relevancy. Self-reflection promotes awareness of past modes of operation at all levels and induces the phenomena of involution, the destruction of forms and structures. Through redefinition of or elimination of the old forms and structures, an evolution takes place. New forms and structures incorporating new ideas, opinions, beliefs, emotional and physical responses, attitudes, and equations of all kinds. These forms and structures determine the totality of the individual's inner and outer reality and how he or she has viewed how he or she has viewed and integrated him or herself into society in which they live. Because the 10th house Capricorn and Saturn all correlate to our need to establish and integrate our own authority within the context of social authority, this evolutionary process promotes a time wherein the individual must examine the nature and basis of his or her existing place in the world and society and so forth. So there's more to that, but I won't read any more. I guess, there's a comment here. During the evolutionary process, it is also time to examine the basis of personal judgments and the standards of conduct from which these judgments originate. These standards have evolved through parental and social conditioning, personal actions, and have led to many experiences through which a judgment was made, and prior life conditioning influences that are linked to these two dynamics. Judgments equal mental and emotional attitudes, responses based on the conditioning dynamics. So anyway, I'm reading from Pluto. Pluto 1, the evolutionary journey of the soul. And those were just some comments about Pluto in Capricorn or Pluto in the 10th house. And they are just some themes that you can actually think about in terms of your own life and your own birth chart and where Pluto is transiting and has been since 2008, since it first entered Capricorn. So Pluto is retrograde for half of the year, okay? And the other half of the year it's direct. So that basically means that half of the population are born either with Pluto retrograde or Pluto direct. People born with Pluto retrograde experience a deeper desire and a deeper dissatisfaction with this world and with this life. The dissatisfaction emerges because Pluto retrograde implies a journey of recognizing the desires that only create a separation from source, separating desires. And that process, and I talked a little bit about this when I talked about Mars and Pluto in, I think, a couple of videos ago. So that if you want to know more about that, go to that video, which was posted just a few days ago. But in any case, it's important to address here again to some extent, because Pluto retrograde, which is what we have all been experiencing the last 6 months, has turned the attention within for us to go into a deeper reflective process around recognizing the dissatisfaction of life, and very specifically the separating desires, which is our urge and impulse and desires to go out into the world and experience the various things that we do, only to discover that it's still not fulfilling something much deeper inside us. It's not cutting it, it's not enough. It's there's something still empty about it, hence the word dissatisfaction. So Pluto retrograde always invites us back into that experience of working through these sorts of things for the purposes of returning back to source, and for that reason recognizing our own inherent infinite nature, soul, spirit, right? So there's a few layers there that we've got the Pluto in Capricorn, and how that's really projected this image for us around the perspective of reality and all the conditions we've had about it, right? Believing this, believing that, following this, following that, believing this was true, believing this is what reality is, was, etc. And Pluto retrograde also implies an accelerated process of cataclysmic events erupting both internally and externally in order for the evolution to somewhat speed up a bit. So every time Pluto goes retrograde, that way of Pluto operating is always activated to some extent, collectively and individually. And the sense of dissatisfaction that can be evoked within us it's a cyclic process, and the cyclic process is born out of Pluto going retrograde each time. Now, you may be born with Pluto retrograde in your chart. I was. So for me, it's the story of my life. The deep desire to merge back with source every time, no matter what I experience out in the world, no matter how much I'm growing, no matter how many mistakes I make, no matter how many new things I discover, I always feel a deep desire to go back to source, right? To my Father in heaven, just to use some biblical language. So it's a very, very deep process and journey every time Pluto goes retrograde. The other thing that is important to recognize here is that Pluto represents the unconscious, the soul, the matters within us that our soul is desiring to experience, and subsequently eliminate those desires again in order to return back to source. So we go through these cyclic journeys of deep introspection and sometimes very deep dissatisfaction, the recognition of that satisfaction, which doesn't feel great, but it actually is a profound process of transmuting, transforming what is no longer satisfactory. And a lot of that is, in Capricorn particularly, is around the conditioned views and beliefs we've had on what our life is and what this life is all about. So it's breaking down those barriers and those walls and those structures, Capricorn, that have been built over a very, very long time. Now, when Pluto went retrograde in April this year, it was around about the time of a solar eclipse in Taurus. 6 months later, which is now October, Pluto is has stationed direct, and it's taking place, just a week or so before another solar eclipse, right? Which makes sense because the way the solar eclipses run is that there's a 6-month gap, right? So the importance of that is that the nodes being in Taurus-Scorpio, which is why we have Taurus-Scorpio eclipses this year, are totally plugged in to Pluto's journey throughout this entire year, throughout 2022. So therefore, the Taurus-Scorpio axis is highly amplified in 2022. And because of Pluto's stationing retrograde and then stationing direct, it's happening, the eclipses are happening at around about the same time. Furthermore, this eclipse that is taking place on the 25th of October, which is a new moon in Scorpio, it's a solar eclipse, is within range already. The solar eclipse date is on the 25th of October, but the window and range of that energy being activated is 3 months pre and post the actual date. So there'll be many people that have already seen what this eclipse is about for them. I'm one of those people, and I don't really wish to discuss personal details, but I can tell you now that it's been an eye-opening experience. Now, because it's Taurus and Scorpio that's involved, this axis, then the themes of whatever Taurus and Scorpio represent are the dominant themes of 2022 in terms of Pluto and in terms of solar eclipses. Solar eclipses always bring things up from the unconscious and are brought to light. For better or for worse, it's brought to light. So we, on the personality level, we are sort of directing our life as we think we want to or need to. And we have, a particular agenda or a particular idea of what we think we're doing or what we want to be doing. And, the unconscious is typically at a different level to what our daily conscious mind is at, right? And so that's why people can experience a bit of a shock with solar eclipses in terms of what comes up, because the unconscious gets activated with solar eclipses and brings to the surface what's been culminating or what's being activated and what needs to be seen and understood from a conscious level. So while Pluto has been retrograde the last 6 months, there's been a huge component of our psyche, the soul, the unconscious, sorting things out, working through different things, particularly corresponding to Capricorn, to wherever Pluto is in your chart, transit-wise, and also to the themes of Scorpio and Taurus, which highlight matters of, well, first of all, Taurus speaks to survival. How do we survive in this life with our own resources? How do we build our own resources? And of course, it brings in matters of self-worth as well. And of course, matters of value, because we're talking about a Venus-ruled house, right? Taurus. But the main essence of the Taurus archetype is that sense of needing to figure out how I can survive, on this earth plane. And that theme might be more pronounced for some people and not so pronounced for others. It's the archetype of finances as well. It's your own finances. It's how you create your resources, your own resources, right? Now, for some people who are extremely wealthy, that's perhaps not necessarily going to be a highlighted theme for them. On the other hand, it could be, because people can make a lot of money and can lose a lot of money at different points in life as well. So there's lots of different layers. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone who's extremely wealthy will not be touched by this at all. Solar eclipses tend to show you what path you really need to be on. And sometimes that can be like a rude awakening, a real shock, because you had very different intentions or motivations or desires to what actually does show up with the solar eclipse. So solar eclipses are not an easy energy. They're usually pretty challenging, actually. And it's always about alignment. And if we're if we're in some kind of misalignment, the solar eclipse will bring us back into alignment. But it's never done in a way that's easy, let's say. You know, it's quite challenging with what it brings up for us. So Scorpio, Taurus, my own resources, Taurus, how I survive, how I can actually create the resources that I need to build the life that I want to build, how I value myself and my time, my essence and who I am, how I nurture my self-worth, how I understand my own worth and value, and how I continue to cultivate that aspect of who I am. Scorpio, how I interact and share with others, sexually, psychologically, and emotionally, relying on others' resources, having shared resources with others, experiencing very deep, transformative, alchemical journeys in deep love, in soul connection, being shown your weak spots, your greatest fears, Scorpio, matters of yourself being exposed, being seen. Solar eclipses reveal what's hidden. In Scorpio, which is an archetype that connects to what's hidden, obviously there's going to be a lot that's going to come up, already has come up to certain people. As I said, the solar eclipse has a 3-month orb pre the date that it actually aligns, which is 25th of October. And we're only, a week or so away from that date. So this solar eclipse in Scorpio has been active, for the last 2 months, basically. So think about the Taurus-Scorpio axis and that polarity and the matters that it represents and where that is in your chart, and what perhaps took place around about April when we had the Taurus solar eclipse and Pluto went stationary retrograde, and now we're at the other end. Pluto's going stationary direct, and we are about to step into, well, we're already in it, but the date of it is shortly to arrive. That is the Scorpio solar eclipse. So it's literally, we've gone from one end to the other on both spectrums, with Taurus, Pluto retrograde, Scorpio, Pluto direct. So this theme of Scorpio Taurus is very, very important and very, very pronounced. It is one of the most challenging axes in the chart as well, one of the most challenging polarity points. In terms of, because we talk a lot about shadow when we talk about astrology or psychology, or certain archetypes in the zodiac, working with our own shadow. And I just want to show you this. It's just a funny kind of thing, but so I love this picture. It's a cat looking at himself saying, and the quote says, "We cannot escape ourselves." I just absolutely adore this, but anyway, I just wanted to share that quickly. That's shadow work. So I've just lost track of what I wanted to say there. It'll come back. But some of the things to consider about Pluto stationing direct, whatever's been worked through in the last 6 months on the unconscious levels is now going to be seen. The work that we have done, what we have integrated, will now be slowly seen. It's another process of integration again. Pluto went direct just a few days ago, so that doesn't mean that, in a day or two, we're going to see the whole workings of what we've been up to the last 6 months. It's just a gradual kind of process. But in some cases, there is quite a crystallization already for what this Pluto retrograde journey has been about, particularly relative to the Scorpio-Taurus solar eclipses. Pluto, whether direct or whether retrograde, always speaks to transformation, transmutation, death, rebirth, shedding the old, plunges into the depth of the soul, represents the soul, brings up matters of obsession, compulsion, control, power struggles, renewal, the phoenix rising from the ashes, deconditioning from an old persona, an old identity, an old sense of self that was anchored and hooked into very specific, conditioned ways of being, ways of seeing, things we believed in, and so forth. Pluto also is, the god of the underworld. Hades is the Greek name, the ruler of the underworld. And so Pluto speaks to the occult, to what's hidden. The underworld is a metaphor for our own unconscious, essentially, right? Pluto also connects to riches, the deepest riches in the deepest soil of the earth, if you like, which again is another metaphor for the depths of our own soul, the riches that are contained at the depths of our own soul. And sometimes, on an external physical level, it can also be riches in massive material gain as well, or loss for that matter, because if Pluto is going through your second house, and I've seen this happen to people, sometimes people will have Pluto bringing them huge amounts of riches, as it were, material gain, and then they'll go through another cycle where it can all just be sort of taken away. It's very hard to control that process of Pluto, because Pluto is always asking us to die, to transform, to release, to purge, to be reborn. And there's a lot of fear around that from the personality, especially because the personality just wants to maintain control. And the personality is the component of our self that is attached to things, people, situations, whatever it is. Attachment is part of the personality, right? So when Pluto comes in, it always asks us to release certain attachments. And when you're talking about that being letting go of a person you love, that's where you feel the death of what Pluto means. That's where you realize the true impermanence of this physical dimension. And that's generally, I think for most people, a very deep, dark night of the soul journey. That's what happened to me when my father transcended 5 years ago, 5 years and 6 months ago. And if I go into that space inside me, I can still feel that agony that I felt when it happened. So, there's different levels of attachments and what attachments we need to release. And releasing attachments on the physical level, for some people, that's really difficult as well. That can be really painful. That's the Taurus side, right? Which is the sign opposite to Scorpio. There's the shadow. A good example, and it is an extreme example, but it just highlights, right, this power of the shadow between Taurus and Scorpio. Taurus, by its very nature, is a pretty relaxed sign. It's pretty chilled out, pretty basic in a lot of ways on that sort of personality external level. When you go into esoteric astrology, Taurus takes on another level relative to spiritual meaning. But in the personality exoteric level of astrology, Taurus is essentially the sign that appreciates money, knows how to make money, appreciates the sensual aspects of life, comfort and so forth. But it has an incredible, powerful attachment to its possessions. And Scorpio, being the polarity to Taurus, is that component in Taurus that can be paranoid that someone somewhere is looking to take their money, to take their possessions. So there's this kind of paranoia that can translate into bigger issues of control. People like there's been a lot of individuals historically who have annihilated thousands of people on the earth plane, for instance, Hitler being one of them, who was a Taurus. Timothy McVeigh, who did the bombing in, I've just forgotten the state in America. There's quite a few Taurians. I've just forgotten the names of them. There was another one here in Australia, Tasmania actually, Martin Bryant, who killed a lot of people as well. All these individuals are Taurians, and it's the Scorpio component that's activated the shadow, that's contributed to the paranoia and the desire for control on those levels. So I know they're extreme examples, but you guys know me. I explore the darker side of life, and I like to bring in examples that are real things that have happened in life. I'm not afraid of the darker side of life. I'm not afraid of the darker side of life. Those sorts of life experiences, they happen. Denying them or having extreme judgment towards them is only just a reflection of the unresolved matters within our own self. So I'm okay with the dark side of life. That's not to say that I condone those sorts of acts, of course not, but I can observe them pretty objectively. So Pluto going direct, moving forward over the next few months, it's going to stay on the 26th degree of Capricorn, which is where it's stationed direct until December, which is a pretty long time. And that's showing us just how slowly, well, first of all, it's the slowest moving planet. It takes 248 years to go around the entire zodiac, right? So when Pluto stops to station in a particular direction, that stationary period is longer than what any other planet would be, right? So the 26th degree is active, well, actually till next year. No, sorry, till the end of this year. And then Pluto will move on to the 27th degree, and then 28, 29, and then by March next year, it's going to go into Aquarius, which of course I'll come back and talk about that. But you can really think about this particular stationary direct period of Pluto is a portal of very profound closures and endings in your life, which will feel quite intense because it's a culmination of more or less everything that's been happening since 2008 in one way or another about our relationship to reality, about our life structure. And because the 2.5 years have been so cataclysmic on the collective, it's accelerated that process of what everything Pluto in Capricorn has meant since 2008. And so coming to the very last degrees of Capricorn now, there's going to be another acceleration, as it were, because it's preparing to complete that journey, right, of being in Capricorn. It's not going to get there again in our lifetime. It's going to get there again in 248 years. So there's huge implications with Pluto closing its chapter with Pluto in Capricorn, and particularly 2023 and 2024, Pluto will be closing the last couple of degrees of Capricorn. So there's huge implications of that, and that would definitely describe very profound, accelerated evolutionary transformations for people, and certainly for the collective. So those are the sorts of things that you can consider when you are thinking about what's Pluto direct going to be for me, well, it's going to show you what you've actually worked through in the unconscious domain within you, what you've been doing the last 6 months on those levels. It is intense, and because it does represent death and rebirth, the death and rebirth journey corresponds to mental, physical, spiritual, psychological areas. So it could be a death of a loved one. For me, it has been the greatest love of my life, my dad. And it also has been deep psychological and emotional deaths that I've actually undergone really over the last 15 years since Pluto has been in my 12th house, which I've mentioned of late, that I'm going to talk about that soon. So the other thing as well that I think is worth considering, we've got the solar eclipses, Taurus-Scorpio, which pronounce the matters of survival, resources, my own resources, recognizing how I may have been using other people's resources, and that might be a matter that brings up certain matters of endings. Things need to end with certain people or situations or whatever it may be, in order for you to actually realize your own sense of empowerment and strength. That's basically what it's trying to highlight to us. These Scorpio Taurus eclipses are just trying to show us our own power, which is not attached to anything external. But it's hard because we are in our physical nature, we are attached to enormous things on the physical level. So that's why it strips us right back, to the essence. It's not even bare bones. Bones is Saturn. It goes much deeper than bones. It goes right into the soul. And the more we can get the personality to step out of the way and bring forth some trust in that the soul knows what it's doing. It has very specific intentions and desires for its own evolution. When we can somehow reconcile with that, come closer to that, open up to that possibility, the transformative process won't be easy, but there can be a greater sense of understanding as to why it's happening in the way that it is, right? And one thing I do know about life is that, and I see this and have seen it my whole life in people's lives and situations, when something is happening that's really intense and painful, if there's no meaning to it, then that's what takes one down a visceral experience of this is just pointless, this is so painful. What's the point of this? There's no purpose to this, I don't want to be here anymore. It's just so fucking painful, right? And so having meaning to a painful situation is a way to help us transform and navigate through it. Sorry, I've got a real frog in my throat. So meaning, which is corresponds to the archetype of Sagittarius, is what can help us connect to the why this is happening. any situation that occurs, if we don't understand why, that's what brings up despair, meaninglessness and despair and struggle and unnecessary pain, as it were. So meaning is important. Pluto stationing direct is also going to align with the Libran Venus star point. And that's a big deal because that star point is a new cycle that's going to speak to the next 120 years or something like that. It's a new Venus star point on the pentagram. It's changing from Scorpio to Libra, and the birth of that star point would be looking at the chart for that moment, which is the Sun-Venus conjunction, okay, Cazimi. It's an evening star in Libra, so there's a lot of implications about that, which I'll come back to talk about, but I just wanted to highlight that Pluto stationing direct is going to be squaring that Libran Venus star point. So there's a few themes to consider here with Pluto's direct movement. What's been working in the unconscious what's the word? I've just lost the word. What's been working in the components? Thank you. What's been working in the unconscious components within us? What have we resolved and worked through and subsequently purged and released and are able to integrate now into a new sense of life? Because Pluto, the rebirth is the resurrection, It's resurrecting ourselves, right? So we've got the eclipses, we've got Pluto direct, and we've got Pluto forming a square to the Libran Venus star point, which once again is speaking to very intense, cataclysmic, in some cases, transformative journeys in the experience of relationships and how we relate to people, how we have related to people, and what work we need to do on that level. Because relationships are a mirror. They mirror back to us what is unresolved or what we are out of touch with within our own self. And the way to know whether somebody is reflecting like a mirror to you, if it's disturbing you, if it's bothering you, if it's upsetting you, if it's pissing you off, if it's triggering you, it's safe to assume that that's a matter that's deeply unconscious within you. Because if it's something that you are integrated into and have evolved through in some kind of way, you're not going to have a reaction to it. It doesn't matter what that mirror shows you. That's the way to kind of gauge where you are at with that mirror, that person, that relationship. So Pluto going direct, squaring this Venus star point, will be bringing up some very intense matters in how we relate to people and what do relationships mean to us. They will change. Relationships are going to transform in ways that we can't even conceive of at the moment because Pluto is squaring this Venus star point. But more about that later. I'll come back. I think I'm supposed to be meeting with Ariel Gutman to talk about the Libran Venus star point, but she's been so flat out. I think she's still in Denver, Colorado. She's just done a presentation there on the Libran Venus star point. So she's kind of flying around everywhere, being a social little butterfly, but working. So we will try and get her on my channel soon. It's just a question of her schedule. So whether it's post the date of the actual occurrence of the Sun-Venus conjunction, which is 22nd of October, even if we do it after that, it doesn't matter because this is a cycle that speaks to the next 120 years. So whether we talk about it in 2 weeks' time or in a month's time, that's not going to be, a profound matter. Okay, so I think that's really the main gist of Pluto direct. Just checking to see if I've covered what I wanted to cover. Yeah, I think that's it. I think I can leave it there, and I'll see you guys soon. I know I've been, pardon me, been quite active the last week because there's just so much going on, and I'm going to be taking some time off in November, so I'm just trying to bring as much as I can before I take that time out. I just need a bit of a rest time. So I've shared quite a bit the last week, and yeah, hopefully it's been helpful to you guys. And if you appreciate it, once again, hit the thanks button. You know what to do. That shows me your appreciation, and I always appreciate that as much as you appreciate me. So thanks again, guys, for watching and supporting. Feel free to share this video, and as always, feel free to share your experiences or questions or comments, and see you very soon. Much love and many star blessings. Bye for now.